The city of Manhattan was quiet that night, but inside the old stone cathedral, something dangerous was about to happen. Rows of candles burned along the walls. Armed men stood in every corner, dressed in black suits, their eyes cold and watching. This was not a normal wedding. This was a business deal, and the bride was the price. Her name was Elena Voss, and she was only 24 years old. She stood at the church door, wearing a white dress that felt heavier than iron chains. Her hands were shaking. She did not know the man waiting for her at the altar. She only knew his name, and that name made grown men go pale with fear. Dante Moretti. People called him the Underworld Baron. He controlled half the ports in the city. Ships full of secrets moved because of his word. Police feared him. Judges answered his calls. And now, because of a debt her father could not pay, Elena belonged to him. She walked down the aisle slowly. Every step felt like walking toward a cliff. The priest's voice was shaking too, but he kept reading the words. Elena kept her eyes down, refusing to look at the man beside her. She was afraid that if she looked at him, she would break down and cry in front of everyone, and she would not give him that satisfaction. But then, a deep voice spoke beside her. "Look at me." It was not a request. It was an order, soft but heavy, like a hand pressing on her chest. Elena lifted her eyes, slowly, and for the first time, she saw Dante Moretti clearly. He was tall. Taller than any man she had ever stood beside. His shoulders were wide enough to block the candlelight behind him. His jaw was sharp, his eyes were dark gray, almost silver under the churchlights, and they were looking at her like she was something he already owned. There was a small scar above his left eyebrow, a mark from some old war she knew nothing about. He did not smile. He did not need to. His presence alone made the air feel thinner. "You are shaking," he said quietly, only for her to hear. "Do not be afraid of me in front of my men. Save your fear for later, when we are alone." Elena's heart dropped. Those words were not comfort. They were a warning. The priest finished the ceremony quickly, as if he too wanted to leave the room as fast as possible. When it was done, Dante did not kiss her softly like a normal groom. He placed one hand on the back of her neck, firm but not painful, and pressed his forehead to hers for 1 second, like he was marking her as his in front of everyone watching. The men in the room lowered their heads in respect. Some looked away, as if they knew something Elena did not. After the ceremony, black cars lined up outside the cathedral. Dante did not speak to her in the car. He looked out the window the whole ride, his jaw tight, his hands resting on his knees like a man thinking about war, not marriage. Elena sat as far from him as the seat allowed, staring at the city lights passing by, wondering what kind of life she had just been sold into. They arrived at a mansion outside the city, hidden behind tall iron gates and thick trees. The house was beautiful but cold, like a museum instead of a home. Guards stood at every door. Cameras watched every hallway. This was not a house. It was a fortress. Inside, Dante led her up a wide staircase without a single word. Elena's legs felt weak with every step. She did not know what was waiting for her at the top of those stairs, and that fear was worse than anything she had felt at the wedding. He opened the door to a large bedroom. The curtains were dark red, the furniture was heavy and old, and a fireplace burned quietly in the corner. He closed the door behind them, and for the first time, they were completely alone. Elena turned to face him, trying to look brave even though her whole body was trembling. "I am not afraid of you," she said, her voice barely steady. Dante walked closer, slow and unhurried, like a predator that already knew it had won the hunt. He stopped just inches from her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to look at him. "Yes, you are," he said calmly. "And that is smart. Because you have never met a man like me before. You think you are the first dangerous man I have heard about?" Elena snapped back, surprising even herself. "I grew up around men like you. Liars. Bullies who hide behind money and guns." Something changed in his eyes. Not anger. Amusement. A small, dark smile appeared on his lips, the first real expression she had seen from him all night. "Careful, little wife," he said, his voice low. "I did not say I was like the men you have known. I said you have never met a man like me." He reached out and gently touched her chin, tilting her face up toward his. His hand was warm, but his grip carried quiet power, like he could crush stone if he wanted to. "You've never been with a man my size," he said slowly, watching every reaction on her face. "Not just how I look. How I think. How I protect what is mine. How far I will go for the people under my name, and how far I will go against the people who threaten them." Elena's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to step back, but her feet would not move. "Tonight," Dante continued, "you became one of the people under my name. That means you are protected. It also means you are watched. Every hour. Every day." Before Elena could respond, a loud noise echoed from downstairs. A crash. Then shouting. Dante's whole body went still, his eyes turning sharp and alert in less than a second. The calm man from a moment ago disappeared, replaced by someone dangerous and ready for war. "Stay here," he said, his voice suddenly hard as steel. "Do not open this door for anyone but me." He walked out, closing the door behind him, leaving Elena alone in the dark red room, her heart pounding, wondering what kind of danger had just entered her new home, and whether her wedding night was about to become something far more deadly than she ever imagined. Elena stood alone in the dark red room, her heart still racing from the crash she had heard downstairs. Minutes passed like hours. She walked to the door and pressed her ear against the wood, trying to hear anything. Voices. Footsteps. Something heavy being dragged across a floor. But the words were too far away to understand. She thought about running. The window behind her was large, and the garden below looked open, almost inviting. But she remembered the guards at every gate, the cameras in every hallway, and Dante's words from moments ago. Every hour. Every day. Running was not an option. Not yet. So she waited. After almost 20 minutes, the door opened. Dante walked in, his jacket gone, his white shirt stained with a small mark of blood near the sleeve. It was not his blood. His eyes found her immediately, checking her from head to toe, as if making sure she was still safe. "What happened?" Elena asked, her voice quiet but steady. "Someone tried to enter the property," Dante said simply, closing the door behind him. "They did not succeed." "Tried to enter for what?" "For me." Dante did not answer right away. He walked toward the fireplace and stood there for a moment, staring at the flames like he was deciding how much truth she deserved to hear. Finally, he turned to face her. "Your father owed money to more people than just me," he said. "Some of them are not as patient as I am. Some of them do not care about rules or respect. They heard about tonight's wedding, and they thought they could take something valuable before I could protect it." Elena's chest tightened. "Take me." "Yes." The word hit her like cold water. She had spent the whole night thinking Dante was the danger in her life. But now she understood something worse. There were men out there even more dangerous than the one she had just married, men who saw her as nothing but a prize to be stolen. "You are safe," Dante said, walking closer. "No one gets past my walls. Not tonight. Not ever." "You sound very sure of that." "I am always sure," he said. "Confidence is not something I choose. It is something I have earned, one enemy at a time." Elena looked at him carefully, studying the calm on his face even after what had just happened outside. Most people would still be shaking after a fight like that. Dante looked like he had simply finished a business call. "Who were they?" she asked. "The men who came tonight." "Men who work for Riccardo Salvi," Dante said, his voice turning harder at the name. "He has wanted a piece of my territory for 3 years. Tonight he thought a wedding was a good time to test my guards. He was wrong. And now he knows better," Dante said. "And soon he will regret trying." Elena sat down slowly on the edge of the bed, her legs finally too tired to hold her up. Everything felt like too much. The wedding, the mansion, the danger outside the walls, the man standing in front of her who spoke about enemies the way other people spoke about the weather. Dante watched her for a long moment, then walked to a small table near the window and poured a glass of water. He brought it to her without a word and placed it in her shaking hands. "Drink," he said. "You will feel better." Elena stared at him, confused by the sudden gentleness. "Why are you being kind to me? An hour ago you spoke like I was a piece of property." "You are under my protection," Dante said. "That does not mean I own you like an object. It means I am responsible for you. There is a difference, even if the world outside these walls cannot see it." "That is a strange kind of marriage," Elena whispered. "It is the only kind I know how to give," Dante answered honestly. There was something in his voice now, something almost tired, like a man who had lived his whole life inside danger and had forgotten what softness felt like. For the first time, Elena saw something behind his cold gray eyes. Not weakness, but a kind of loneliness she had not expected from a man so powerful. She drank the water slowly, her hands finally growing steady. "Tell me something true," she said. "Not about business. Not about enemies. Something real." Dante was quiet for a moment. Then he sat down in the chair across from the bed, far enough to give her space, close enough to keep watching over her. "I did not choose this life," he said. "It chose me. My father built this empire with blood, and when he died, it became mine, whether I wanted it or not. Every day since then, I have made sure no one takes it away, because if they do, everyone under my protection dies with it. That is the truth behind every cold thing I have said to you tonight." Elena listened carefully, surprised by how honest his words felt. This was not the same man who had spoken about size and power in the church. This was someone tired of carrying a weight too heavy for one man alone. "Then why marry me?" she asked. "Why not just take the money my father owed?" Dante's eyes met hers, steady and unblinking. "Because alliances built on marriage are harder to break than debts written on paper. Salvi and men like him respect blood ties more than business deals. As my wife, you are protected by more than guards and gates. You are protected by my name." Elena did not know what to say. For the first time since the church, she did not feel like a prisoner. She felt like a piece in a much larger, more dangerous game, one she was only now beginning to understand. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows softly. Somewhere far beyond the mansion walls, in a dark office lit only by a single lamp, a man named Riccardo Salvi sat staring at a photograph of Elena from the wedding, his jaw tight with anger. "This is only the beginning," he whispered to the empty room. "Moretti will regret taking what was never his to take." Back inside the mansion, Elena finally allowed herself to close her eyes, unaware that the real danger to her new life had not come from outside the walls at all. It was already living much closer than she could ever imagine. Morning light came through the tall windows of the mansion, soft and golden, but it did not bring peace. Elena woke up alone in the large bed, the space beside her cold and untouched. Dante had not slept there. She sat up slowly, looking around the quiet room, and for a moment she almost believed the danger from last night had only been a dream. Then she remembered the blood on his sleeve, and she knew it was all too real. She got dressed and walked downstairs, following the smell of coffee into a large kitchen. A woman was standing near the counter, maybe in her 50s, with gray hair pulled into a tight bun and sharp, watchful eyes. She turned when Elena entered and gave a small, polite smile that did not fully reach her eyes. "You must be the new Mrs. Moretti," the woman said. "I am Marta. I have worked in this house for 20 years, since Dante's father was still alive." "It is nice to meet you," Elena said carefully, still learning who she could trust in this new world. "Mr. Moretti left early this morning," Marta said, pouring a cup of coffee and sliding it across the counter. "Business. He said you should stay inside the house today. It is safer." Elena nodded, though the idea of staying locked inside these walls all day made her feel like a prisoner again. She sat at the kitchen table, sipping the coffee slowly, watching Marta move around the kitchen with quiet, practiced ease. "Can I ask you something?" Elena said after a moment. "Of course. Last night, someone tried to break into the property. Dante said it was men working for someone named Riccardo Salvi. Do you know him?" Marta's hands paused for just a second over the stove, so brief that Elena almost missed it. Then she continued like nothing had happened. "I know the name," Marta said carefully. "Everyone in this house knows the name. He has been an enemy of the Moretti family for years. Do you think he could get inside? Past all these guards?" Marta turned to look at her then, her expression unreadable. "Men like Salvi do not need to break down gates, Mrs. Moretti. Sometimes, they simply find a door that is already open." The words felt strange, almost like a warning hidden inside a normal sentence. Elena wanted to ask more, but at that moment, footsteps echoed from the hallway, and a young man walked into the kitchen. He was maybe 30 years old, dressed in a fitted black suit, with dark hair and a charming smile that came too easily. "Ah, the beautiful new bride," he said, walking toward Elena with an outstretched hand. "I am Vincent, Dante's cousin. I handle a lot of the business on this side of the city." Elena shook his hand politely, though something about his smile felt slightly off, too practiced, too smooth, like a mask worn for a long time. "Dante did not mention a cousin," she said. "Dante does not mention much," Vincent said with a small laugh, sitting down across from her. "He keeps things close. Old habit from our father's days. Trust is not something he gives easily, even to family." "But he trusts you." Vincent's smile widened slightly. "I am the only family he has left, besides you now. Of course he trusts me." There was something about the way he said it, a small edge underneath the friendly tone, that made Elena's instincts prick with quiet suspicion. She said nothing, only nodded and continued drinking her coffee, but she made a note in her mind to watch this man more carefully. "I heard about last night," Vincent continued, leaning back in his chair. "Solvi's men getting so close to the property. That has never happened before. Our security has always been perfect." "Maybe someone told them where to go," Elena said carefully, watching his face for any reaction. Vincent's eyes flickered, just for a second, before he laughed it off. "You have a suspicious mind for a woman who has been in this family for less than a day. I like that. It will serve you well here." He stood up, straightening his jacket. "I have business to attend to. It was lovely meeting you, Mrs. Moretti. I am sure we will be spending a lot of time together, now that you are part of the family." As he walked out, Elena caught Marta watching him leave with an expression of quiet concern, gone as quickly as it appeared once she noticed Elena looking. "Marta," Elena said softly once Vincent's footsteps faded away, "is there something I should know about him?" Marta hesitated, glancing toward the doorway as if checking they were truly alone. "I have worked in this house a long time, Mrs. Moretti. I have learned that the most dangerous people are rarely the ones standing outside the gates." Before Elena could ask what she meant, Marta shook her head and returned to her cooking, closing the conversation as firmly as a locked door. That evening, Dante returned home, his face tired but his eyes sharp as ever. He found Elena sitting in the study, staring out the window at the darkening garden. "You look like you have questions," he said, sitting across from her. "I met your cousin today, Vincent." Something shifted in Dante's expression, subtle but noticeable, a tightening around his jaw. "What did you think of him?" "He was charming," Elena said. "Too charming, maybe." Dante was quiet for a long moment, staring at the fireplace like he was carrying a decision too heavy to speak out loud. "Vincent has been with this family since we were children," he finally said. "But lately, I have noticed things. Small things. Money moving strangely. Meetings he does not explain." "You think he could be working with Solvi?" "I do not know," Dante admitted, his voice low and controlled, but Elena could hear the storm hiding underneath it. "But last night, only a handful of people knew about our wedding location changing at the last moment. Vincent was one of them." Elena felt a cold chill run down her spine. If Vincent truly was betraying his own family, then the real danger was never outside the mansion walls at all. It had been sitting across the kitchen table that very morning, smiling and shaking her hand like an old friend. "What are you going to do?" she asked quietly. Dante's gray eyes turned hard as steel, the calm businessman disappearing completely, replaced by something far more dangerous. "I am going to find out the truth," he said. "And if my cousin has betrayed this family, betrayed you, there will be no mercy left in me for him." Outside, the wind moved through the trees surrounding the mansion, and somewhere in the shadows near the garden wall, a small red light blinked once, twice, then went dark, a hidden camera, planted days ago, watching the house from the inside, sending everything it recorded straight to Riccardo Solvi. 3 days passed since the wedding, and the mansion had settled into an uneasy quiet. Guards still stood at every gate, but Elena could feel something different in the air, a tension that had nothing to do with Solvi or Vincent. Dante had grown more distant, spending long hours locked in his study, making calls in a low voice that stopped the moment she walked near the door. Elena spent her days walking through the garden, trying to understand this strange new life. She was no longer just a scared bride. She was starting to notice things: the way guards changed shifts at odd hours, the way certain rooms were always locked, the way Marta sometimes looked at her with something close to pity. One afternoon, while walking near the back of the property, Elena noticed a small black object hidden in the bushes near the garden wall. She knelt down and picked it up carefully. It was a tiny camera, no bigger than a coin, with a small red light that had gone dark. Her hands trembled as she turned it over. This was not something a normal family would have hidden in their own garden. Someone had placed this here to watch the house. To watch her. She rushed inside and found Dante in his study, dropping the small camera onto his desk. "I found this in the garden," she said, her voice shaking. "Someone has been watching us." Dante picked it up, his face turning cold and focused as he examined it closely. "This is professional equipment," he said. "Not something Solvi's regular men would use. This is something more careful. More patient. Do you think it was Vincent?" Before Dante could answer, the study door opened, and Vincent walked in, his usual easy smile in place. "Sorry to interrupt. I heard voices." He stopped when he saw the camera on the desk, and for just a moment, something flickered across his face. Fear, perhaps. Or guilt. "What is that?" he asked, his voice a little too casual. "A hidden camera," Dante said, watching his cousin's face carefully. "Found in our garden. Someone has been recording this house." "That is terrible," Vincent said, shaking his head. "I will have security sweep the whole property immediately." "Already done," Dante said flatly. "This was the only one they found. Which is strange, because a professional would usually place more than one." The room fell silent, the tension thick enough to touch. Elena watched the two men stare at each other, cousins who had grown up together now standing on opposite sides of an invisible line. "You think I had something to do with this," Vincent said slowly, his charm finally slipping to reveal something harder underneath. "I did not say that," Dante replied. "You did not have to." Vincent's jaw tightened. "After everything I have done for this family, you still look at me like I am the enemy." "Then prove me wrong," Dante said, his voice quiet but final. "Show me the accounts from the shipping deal last month. The ones you said were still being finalized." Vincent's face went pale for just a moment before he forced a smile back into place. "Of course. I will bring them tomorrow." He turned and walked out quickly, his footsteps echoing down the hallway, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than before. Elena looked at Dante, worry clear on her face. He looked scared. "Guilty men often do," Dante said, though his voice carried something like sadness underneath the hardness. This was still his cousin, the boy he had grown up with, and no amount of betrayal made that easy to accept. Later that night, unable to sleep, Elena wandered down to the mansion's library, hoping a book might quiet her racing mind. She was pulling a novel from the shelf when a voice spoke behind her, one she recognized immediately, though it did not belong in this house. "Elena!" She spun around, her heart stopping in her chest. Standing in the doorway, dressed in a dark coat, was a face from her past she had hoped never to see again. Her older brother, Marcus, who had disappeared 3 years ago after stealing money from their father and vanishing into the underworld. "Marcus!" she whispered, barely able to believe her eyes. "What are you doing here? How did you even get inside?" "I have my ways," Marcus said, stepping further into the room, his eyes darting nervously toward the door behind him. "Elena, listen to me carefully. You are in more danger than you understand." "What are you talking about?" "The man you married," Marcus said quickly. "His war with Solvi is not what you think. It goes back further than territory and money. It goes back to Dad." Elena's blood ran cold. "What does our father have to do with any of this?" Marcus's eyes were filled with fear now, real fear, the kind that made his hands shake. Dad did not just owe Dante money because of bad business, Elena. He owed him because years ago, our father betrayed Dante's family. He sold information to Solvi that got Dante's father killed. The words hit Elena like a physical blow. She stumbled back against the bookshelf, her mind racing to make sense of what she was hearing. "That cannot be true," she whispered. "It is true," Marcus said. "And Dante knows it." This marriage was never just about a debt, Elena. It was about revenge. He married the daughter of the man who destroyed his family, and I do not know what he plans to do with that revenge once he decides the time is right. Footsteps echoed suddenly from the hallway outside, growing closer. Marcus's eyes went wide with panic. "I have to go," he said quickly. "But be careful. Trust no one in this house, not even him. Especially not him." Before Elena could respond, Marcus disappeared through a side door just as the library's main door opened, and Dante stepped inside, his eyes immediately finding her pale, shaken face. "Elena," he said, walking toward her with concern. "What happened? You look like you have seen a ghost." Elena stared at him, the man she had married only days ago, now wondering if everything about their marriage had been built on a lie far darker than she had ever imagined. Could the gentle honesty she had seen in him just nights ago have simply been another mask, hiding a plan for revenge that included her from the very beginning? "Dante," she said slowly, her voice barely steady, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth." His eyes studied her carefully, and for the first time since the wedding, Elena saw something close to fear pass through his gaze, as if he already knew exactly what question was coming. The library felt colder than before. Elena stood near the bookshelf, her arms wrapped around herself, staring at the man she had married only days ago. Dante watched her carefully, his eyes searching her face for the source of her fear. "Ask me," he said quietly. "Whatever it is, ask me." Elena took a shaking breath. "Did my father betray your family? Did he give information to Solvi that got your father killed?" The room went completely silent. Dante's expression did not change at first, but something behind his eyes shifted, like a door closing shut. He walked slowly to the window, looking out at the dark garden, his back turned to her. "Who told you this?" he asked, his voice low. "Does it matter? Is it true?" Dante was quiet for a long moment. Then, finally, he spoke. "Yes, it is true." Elena felt her legs grow weak. She sat down on the edge of a chair, her mind spinning. "So this marriage," she whispered, "it was never about a simple debt. It was about revenge. You married me to punish my father through me." Dante turned to face her, his jaw tight. "That is not entirely true." "Then tell me what is true," Elena said, her voice rising with anger and hurt. "Because right now, I feel like I am standing in the middle of a lie I did not even know I was living." "When your father came to me asking for more time on his debts," Dante said slowly, "I already knew what he had done 10 years ago. I had known for a long time. When he offered his daughter's hand in marriage to settle everything, a part of me agreed because it felt like justice. Taking something valuable from the man who took everything from me." Elena flinched at his honesty, but he continued. "But that was before I met you," Dante said, stepping closer. "Before I saw you shaking at that altar, more afraid of the world than of me. Before I sat in this house and watched you try to be brave every single day, even though you had every reason to hate me." "So what changed?" Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I stopped seeing you as a piece of my revenge," Dante said. "I started seeing you as someone caught in a war you never chose, just like I was, all those years ago when I was a boy watching my father die." Elena wanted to believe him, but the pain of the truth was still too fresh. "You should have told me," she said. "From the very beginning." "I know," Dante admitted. "And I am telling you now, because I would rather you hear the truth from me than believe the version whispered by someone hiding in the shadows of this house." Before Elena could respond, the sound of shouting erupted from downstairs, followed by a gunshot that echoed through the entire mansion. Dante's body went rigid, years of instinct taking over instantly. "Stay here," he ordered, already moving toward the door. "No," Elena said, standing quickly. "I am not staying in another room while the house falls apart around me. Not again." Dante hesitated for only a second before nodding sharply. "Stay close to me. Do exactly what I say." They rushed down the stairs together, finding chaos in the main hallway. 2 guards lay on the ground, one clearly wounded, the other unconscious. Vincent stood near the front door, a gun in his shaking hand, his face pale and desperate. "Vincent," Dante said, his voice deadly calm despite the danger in the room. "What have you done?" "I did not have a choice," Vincent said, his voice cracking. Salvi found out I was stealing from the shipping deals. He said if I did not help him get inside this house, he would kill my family, my real family, my wife and daughter that none of you even know exist. Elena's eyes widened. She had not known Vincent had a family hidden somewhere outside this dangerous world. You should have come to me, Dante said, taking a slow step forward. I would have protected them. Would you? Vincent shouted, his hand shaking harder around the gun. Or would you have punished me first and asked questions later? You have never trusted me completely, Dante. Not really. Not since we were children. That is not true, Dante said, though there was pain in his voice now, old wounds reopening in the middle of the chaos. Suddenly, more men burst through the front door behind Vincent, dressed in dark clothing, moving fast and armed. Salvi's men had used Vincent's betrayal to slip past the gates while the guards were distracted. Get down! Dante shouted, pulling Elena behind a large stone pillar just as gunfire erupted through the hallway. Wood shattered. Glass broke. Shouts filled the air as Dante's remaining guards rushed in to fight back. Elena crouched low, her heart pounding violently, watching through the chaos as Dante moved with terrifying precision, protecting his home, protecting her, fighting off men who wanted nothing more than to tear his entire world apart. In the middle of the fighting, Vincent stood frozen, the gun still in his hand, torn between the family he had betrayed and the family he was desperately trying to save. When one of Salvi's men turned his weapon toward Dante's back, Vincent made a choice. He stepped forward and fired, not at Dante, but at the man aiming for him. The attacker fell instantly. Dante spun around, shocked, staring at his cousin standing there with smoke still rising from his gun. I am sorry, Vincent said, his voice breaking. For all of it. But before anyone could respond, another shot rang out from across the hallway. Vincent's body jerked backward, a dark red stain spreading quickly across his chest. He collapsed to the floor, his eyes wide with shock. Vincent! Dante shouted, rushing toward his fallen cousin as the last of Salvi's men were finally overpowered and dragged away by the remaining guards. Elena ran forward too, kneeling beside Vincent as Dante pressed his hands against the wound, trying desperately to stop the bleeding. Vincent's breathing was shallow, his face growing pale. My family, Vincent whispered weakly, looking up at Dante. Promise me. Protect them. Please. I promise, Dante said, his voice thick with emotion he rarely allowed anyone to see. I promise, Vincent. I will protect them. Vincent's eyes closed slowly, his body going still in Dante's arms, the chaos of the hallway falling into a heavy, painful silence around them. Elena watched the powerful, controlled man she had married break down completely for the first time, holding his cousin's lifeless body, the weight of blood and betrayal finally too much even for the Underworld Baron to carry alone. The mansion was quiet again, but it was not the same quiet as before. This silence carried grief. Vincent's body had been taken away with respect, wrapped carefully, given the honor of a man who, in the end, had chosen his family over his fear. Dante had not spoken much since that night. He stood by windows for long hours, staring out at nothing, his mind clearly somewhere far away. Elena watched him from a distance, unsure how to comfort a man who had spent his whole life believing he had to carry everything alone. On the third day after the attack, she finally walked into his study and sat down across from him without saying a word. You do not have to talk, she said softly. I just did not want you to sit here by yourself again. Dante looked at her, something raw and tired in his gray eyes. I have buried people before, he said quietly. My father. Men who worked for me. Even enemies, when respect demanded it. But this feels different. Vincent grew up beside me. We learned to walk in the same house. And in the end, I could not tell if he was my family or my enemy until the very last second of his life. He chose to save you, Elena said gently. In the end, that is who he was. Not the man who betrayed you out of fear. The man who protected you when it mattered most. Dante nodded slowly, though the pain did not disappear from his face. I will keep my promise to him. His wife and daughter will be protected for the rest of their lives. No one will ever know the full truth of what happened, only that Vincent died protecting this family. That is a kind thing to do, Elena said. It is the only thing I know how to do with guilt this heavy, Dante admitted. turn it into protection for someone else. For a moment, they sat together in silence, two people who had started this marriage as strangers forced together by debt and revenge, now bound by something neither of them had expected to find, understanding, and something dangerously close to love. "There is still Solvi," Elena said after a while. "He will not stop just because his plan failed once." "No," Dante agreed, his voice hardening again. "He will not. But he made one mistake that night. He showed his hand too early. Now I know exactly how he operates, and men like Solvi do not survive long once their advantage is gone." 2 days later, Dante gathered his most trusted men in the study, laying out a plan with the same calm precision he used for everything in his life. Elena was not asked to leave the room this time. She sat quietly in the corner, listening, understanding more about her husband's world with every passing hour. That night, under the cover of darkness, Dante's men moved against Solvi's main warehouse near the docks, the heart of his smuggling operation. Elena stayed behind at the mansion, her nerves tight with worry, pacing the halls until the first light of morning finally brought news. Solvi's empire had fallen apart in a single night. His warehouses were seized. His men, faced with the full force of Dante's retaliation, scattered or surrendered rather than fight a losing war. Solvi himself was captured trying to flee the city, brought before Dante in chains within the very docks he had once ruled. Elena was not there to see what happened in those final moments between Dante and the man who had caused so much destruction. She only knew that when Dante returned home that morning, something in him had finally settled, like a storm that had passed after years of raging. "It is over," he told her simply, standing in the doorway of their bedroom, exhaustion and relief mixing across his face. "All of it?" Elena asked. "Solvi will never threaten this family again," Dante said. "The war my father died fighting, the war I inherited without ever choosing it, ends today." Elena walked toward him slowly, studying the man who had once terrified her at the altar, who had grown into someone she trusted with her life in the strangest, most dangerous circumstances imaginable. "What happens to us now?" she asked quietly. "The debt is settled. The revenge you once wanted is not something you want anymore. So what does that make this marriage?" Dante reached out, gently taking her hand in his gray eyes softer than she had ever seen them. "It makes it a choice," he said. "Not a debt. Not a punishment. A choice, if you are willing to make it with me." Elena's heart pounded, but this time it was not from fear. "And if I choose you," she asked, "what kind of life am I choosing?" "A dangerous one," Dante admitted honestly. "But also one where you will never stand alone again. Where every wall of this house, every guard, every drop of loyalty I have built over the years, exists to protect you as much as it protects me." Elena looked into his eyes, remembering every moment since that terrifying night at the church, the fear, the danger, the honesty, the loss, and finally, this quiet moment of choice standing between them. "Then I choose you," she said softly. "Not because of debt. Not because of fear. Because somewhere between the danger and the darkness, I found something in you worth choosing." Dante pulled her closer, resting his forehead against hers, the same way he had done that very first night at the altar, but this time it did not feel like an act of ownership. It felt like a promise finally understood by both of them. "You've never been with a man my size," he whispered again, the same words from their wedding night, but now carrying an entirely different meaning. "Not just in power. In loyalty. In how deeply I will love what belongs to my heart, for the rest of my life." Outside, the sun rose fully over the mansion, lighting up the gardens where danger had once hidden in the shadows. The war was over. The lies between them were gone. And in its place stood something neither of them had expected to find in a marriage built on debt and revenge, a love strong enough to survive blood, betrayal, and every dark secret the Underworld had thrown against it.